Welcome to your community of fee-for-service financial advisors who are successfully building profitable firms that serve the next generation of clients. You'll learn from innovative advisors whose unique stories will inspire you to dream big and take action on your goals. Are you ready to live your great life and help clients live theirs? Then you're in the right place.
Hello and welcome to this episode of XYPN Radio. I'm your host, Alan Moore, and today I'm excited to welcome XYPN member Colton Etherton, founder of Out of the Office Planning in Beaverton, Oregon, on the show today. Colton started his career on the banking side of financial services, then worked at Merrill Edge, Schwab, then an independent RIA. He became unemployed very unexpectedly and made the decision to launch his firm, which was a dream he had, but he admits he wasn't ready financially. His wife went back to work full-time in order to support that dream, working night shifts so that he could follow his entrepreneurial dream. He didn't get much traction early on, so he made a pivot into a niche 6 months in and is now growing super fast, having brought in over 10 clients in 6 months. His niche is tattoo artists, and we talk about how he's positioned himself to be the go-to resource for those clients in his niche. It's a very cool story, and I appreciate his willingness to be open about the struggles launching a firm created for him and his spouse and how they've been able to make it all work as parents. You can find any of the additional resources and links mentioned during the episode, the transcript, and more at xyplanningnetwork.com/341. Without further ado, here's my interview with Colton. Thanks for being a listener of XYPN Radio. We want to hear from you about what you want to hear from us. What types of guests do you want to learn from next? What topics or pain points are you craving insights on? Go to xyplanningnetwork.com/radio survey to fill out a short survey telling us what and who you want to hear from on XYPN Radio. That's xyplanningnetwork.com/radio survey. Hey, Colton, welcome to the show, man. Thanks so much for being on.
Hey, thanks for having me, Alan. I appreciate it.
So you were sharing before we started recording that you have been listening to the podcast since we started it, not necessarily every episode, but very interested in hearing about your career path and sort of how the podcast played a part in that. I'm really excited to have you on because you have just such a unique niche and so specific, which is something we obviously encourage and really promote. So I appreciate you taking the time to come on the show and share your story.
Yeah, of course. It's like I said before we started, it's kind of weird, being in this seat because I have been listening since probably 2016 or so, back when I was at Schwab. And so just to kind of be here instead of being the one listening is kind of cool. Everything kind of coming full circle at that point.
It is. It's full circle, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's awesome. So, let's give listeners sort of an overview of your firm. So where are you located? Okay. How many clients do you have? When did you start? Just sort of the back of the baseball card, if you will.
Yeah. So let's see. I'm located in Beaverton, Oregon, which is a suburb of Portland. So I'm 8 miles from downtown. I launched and was approved by the state of Oregon late January 2021, but I kind of scrapped everything after about 9 months and started over in October, first week of October of 21. So I don't know. It's kind of weird to say January because everything's completely different.
We'll definitely talk about that. So October sort of hit the reset button.
Yep. Completely on everything, social medias, website, all that.
Okay.
Right now got about 10 clients, a few more looking to onboard over the next couple months. Majority of those being tattoo artists, couples, that kind of thing. But majority being tattoo artists, one or a couple that aren't, but yeah.
Okay. Awesome. So when you hit the reset button, did most of your clients come on board after that sort of October reset?
They did. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So 10 clients and we're recording this in May. So I think this goes live. I'm recording a little bit further out because I'm going to be on sabbatical the month of June. And so we're recording this in May. I think this goes live in August. Have been, 6-7 months since you started from when we're recording at least. So 10 clients, which is amazing. So that's incredible growth. So let's just take a step back and sort of give me your career history. How did you get into deciding to launch your own firm? Like, how did you get into financial services?
Yeah, I never thought I'd be here. To be fair, I didn't want to be here, honestly.
Okay.
So the only reason I got into finance was really because of my wife. So we're originally from Arizona, both of us born and raised there. We actually grew up like a quarter mile from each other and went to all the same schools, all that fun stuff. But after we got married, we wanted to move out of Arizona. Neither of us wanted to stay there. So we came up to Portland. And at that point, I was actually training dogs, worked for this independent company, and didn't really want to do that again up here. And so I was looking at jobs, and my wife found a job at a bank, and she's like, you should apply, it's decent. I was like, no way. Like, that looks incredibly boring. I was being a teller at that point. This is like 2013. I was like, I don't want to do that. She's like, well, just apply. If you get it, at least we have a job when you move up there, and then you can find something else. It's like, all right.
I'm curious what you thought you wanted to do. Or did you know yet?
I didn't really know. At the time I was still going to school for small business management and entrepreneurship. So I knew eventually like that was the goal. Right. But I didn't know, I had no clue at that point, like where I wanted to go. My dad's an electrical engineer, does consulting, considered, joining him with his business at one point. And when I was younger, tried that for about a week, realized that was not it. So yeah, man, I was just kind of completely unsure, and I just knew entrepreneurship at some point down the road was what I wanted. But
I mean, and the truth is, any of us who thought we knew, because I thought I knew what I wanted to do at that age, and I'm not doing it. So it's just like, even if you're sure, you never really know. And if you're not sure, same position. So,
yeah. So,
all right, so you applied to be a teller. Very interesting, fast-paced job.
It is
a little different than entrepreneurship.
It is. And actually, it actually turned out that I liked it, which, of course, my wife reminds me of often. And we're only up here for about 6 months in Portland. Had to move back to Arizona because my wife got into nursing school earlier than anticipated. There's a whole wait list and whatever, but it just shook out differently than we thought. So we went back for a couple of years, still worked at a bank there for most of the time. But then I had a buddy over at Merrill Edge. And he was like, hey, we're hiring. Why don't you come apply, do the investment side? And I was like, all right. At that point, like the bank side, it was like I could go be a mortgage lender or just go a completely different route. And I was like, I don't want to do that. So I went, got my 7 and 66 over there, got locked in a room for a month and some books and said, here, study. Really, I was just doing like operations. I was opening accounts for their advisors that were doing rollovers and that kind of thing. But I really actually enjoyed most of the studying, so I was like, man, I could actually see this, being a career here. And so then finished those, and within, I don't know, a month or two after finishing both those licenses, I signed up for the CFP program because I was kind of hooked. So I did that. And then we finally got back up here to Portland, and that was March 2016. And then at that point I was working at Schwab for, a year and a half, 2 years.
Okay.
And then, thought I wanted to be an advisor there. That didn't pan out. Someone I knew connected me with an independent firm here, and that was where I started advising and doing all that stuff.
Okay. So you really have seen a lot of different corners of the industry with banking and then Merrill and then Schwab. What was your role at Schwab?
Client service associate. I was helping out at the front. I was helping out advisors with all the other paperwork, doing, bringing in stacks of POAs to sign for all 8 accounts that they had, all that fun stuff.
Yep. All right. So the ones who we only talk about the customer service folks or client service folks when they're not doing the things that we want them to do. But it's a heavy lift. It's an important job that we probably underappreciated as advisors, just how much those folks do. And just like, it's not like they have the best systems as well. So they're working on antiquated systems, trying to, in tech, we like to call it Wizard of Ozing, where it looks really good to the advisor, but in the end, it's just people behind the curtains doing all the work manually.
Exactly.
It's an interesting role and a lot of interesting work, because like I know for myself, I came out of school always working in fielding RIAs, always on the planning side. The first account I ever opened was when I started my firm. I had no idea how to open an investment account, and I feel like that's really your experience there with Schwab probably was really valuable just in learning how back office operations really work. I know it's different at Schwab than an RIA, but still like that. That's probably really valuable.
I agree. I'm honestly really glad I did go that route first, just to learn that. And then also just really for the appreciation, right? Because I mean, the operations people really make everything run. And like my team at the firm I eventually moved to was awesome, but they also appreciated that if they were busy, I was comfortable enough doing that myself, right? Like not everyone was. And so, I could go and I can open the account or do, whatever paperwork I needed. And they knew it wasn't just going to be a mess that they would have to redo, right? So they'd be okay with me taking it to the client and doing it and not kind of overburdening themselves, if you would. Yeah, so I think it was definitely a good thing to have. And I mean, I think for younger, newer people that want to be advisors, I think it's great to get 6 months or a year of just doing that and learning all that stuff that is behind the scenes, if you will.
Are you in a position where you, and I guess anything you could share with listeners that like how you possibly can get things done at the custodian that maybe someone like myself who never worked in a custodian, like asking the right questions, knowing how to escalate, I don't know, like, do you find you're able to navigate that and any tips for folks who haven't worked there to be able to help themselves basically?
That's a great question. I wish I could say yes, but no, not really. And the reason being is they kind of keep it separate. Like at Schwab, right? We had the retail side for our advisors, and then we had the alliance side, right, for RAs and that kind of thing. And honestly, a lot of this stuff was different.
Yeah.
Like they had the POA form that you could write all the accounts and sign once, which to us was crazy. We're the big company here, and we had to use a different POA form for every account. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, it was quite a bit different, and the service teams were different, and just the way they operated. And I'm seeing that now, because I have a couple of accounts over at Schwab too, but I'm seeing how different that is, and like, it was nice there because like they had this team that would help the operations where we can essentially assign them stuff to do as well and follow up on stuff. And then they just keep us updated because we had so much going on with walk-ins and also the advisors stuff they were doing. But yeah, it's kind of a different beast on different sides of the aisle.
All right. No, good to know. Yeah, that's something that frustrates advisors sometimes because the retail side, which as much as we wish it wasn't the case, like the retail side is the moneymaker for these custodians and they get the cool tech. Sometimes that cool tech doesn't always trickle over to advisors where, retail gets one-click account opening and we get, paper forms that require a notary.
Yeah. Honestly, we didn't get that on the retail side. We were looking at it the other way. Like, man, these advisors got it easy with the, simpler forms. And I think I could be wrong, but I think the idea is more so like the advisors are kind of taking on I don't want to say risk, but
some of the liability for
the liability. Yeah. And so Schwab itself was like, no, we want, a form for each account for all this other stuff, or we want, all this. And some, back then, that was 2016, a lot of the local RIAs that used us would, come in and we'd help them with operation stuff as well. I don't think they're as friendly with that anymore to do that. From last I talked to someone, when I called the service team, I was like, can I just go to the branch? And they're like, yeah, we don't really like people doing that anymore. It's like, oh, okay. That's a bummer.
Yeah, that's interesting. All right. So you left Schwab, you go to an RIA, and I have a note here that said you helped them launch a broker dealer. So can you talk about that experience?
Yeah, that was an interesting one. So they were hybrid, had some old legacy annuity business from 07, 08, that kind of stuff, and had used other broker dealers, and owners weren't really fond of them. And so the owner himself, the main owner, was also an attorney, and so he's like, is it really that hard if I just want to start my own broker dealer, just as like a limited use to hold these accounts, paying these other companies, and it's like we're not really writing new business. We're just holding legacy stuff. So we looked into it, realized, you need 2 principals to do that, which is Series 24. So I was the lucky one to get that. If you can avoid that test, I highly recommend it. It's honestly the only one.
Legalese.
Yeah. And yeah, it's like 5 different sections. And I think we used a sliver from one section for what we were doing.
Right.
And I think that's the only test I've really failed for securities licenses. And I did it twice. It's not fun. So yeah, avoid it if you can. So we set up a broker dealer just to house those. I had to fly with the main owner to the Denver FINRA office and, run through the questions there and get interviewed by them and that whole thing. Yeah. Then we just
you mentioned limited purpose. I don't think folks are really familiar what that means. So when we think of broker dealer, I think of, you're out selling products. So can you just, I know it's not sort of your core area where you're at now, but you obviously did a deep dive. So what is a limited purpose broker dealer or limited use?
Yeah. So basically it was, the only reason we wanted it was to hold those old accounts. And from my understanding, he did most of the setting it up and everything. But my understanding is, you can say what you want to use your broker dealer for, right? Whether it's selling mutual funds or annuities, and all that stuff. And it's like, hey, we just want to hold these old annuity contracts. And so that's also, from my understanding, a little easier to get that approved. But that also comes with, we still had to get contracts in place with the carriers to approve us to hold those contracts and that kind of stuff. But it's basically like, we're not writing new business. We just want to hold these for our clients and not pay someone else to hold them going forward. And then, he had a whole plan to transition it at some point and like offer a similar service to other advisors that wanted to go independent, which was interesting. I'm not really sure where they're at with that now, but yeah, he wanted to basically offer it as a service where other advisors can like put their annuities that they have legacy, on the platform and then be like a consultant and essentially have someone from that broker dealer be the person they connect with and help the advice, and they can drop their 7.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for explaining that.
Yeah.
Sounds like a delightful journey. So then fast forward, I guess what then made you to sort of helped you make the decision that you wanted to go independent and launch your own firm?
Mm-hmm. I mean, that was something honestly I thought about very early on, like back when I was at Schwab. I remember being like on my break and, like I said, I listened to the XY podcast and I was downloading, some of the free guides and whatnot on my break and going through them and kind of working through all that at that point. It's probably like 2017. And I didn't go to that other firm until April 2018. But so I thought about it and like, I almost was going to just go independent right after Schwab and not go to this other firm, but it didn't. So went with this firm, was actually supposed to be buying into the firm. We had talks about it and, before I left, I was managing principal. So doing that, I was supposed to buy, we talked about up to like 10%. Had a disagreement on how I should hire my team. So I was also helping manage the advisors. You actually had my old coworker, Stephanie Pickard, on not too long ago. So her and I actually left, like she put her 2 weeks in. Mine was very abrupt, but it was the same day, essentially, that we ended up parting. And so, that was very unexpected. Like I woke up that day not thinking at all that I was going to go anywhere. Like I thought I was going to be buying into this company and, owner was going to transition out and then, I was going to take it over. So yeah, I woke up, we had a call, didn't go very well, obviously, and was out of work at that point. And that was
wow. So just that disagreement led to an immediate.
There was a few other things up to that, yeah, and then it was very political, I guess. I don't, we don't dive too far into it, but it was politically based in a sense. And so and initially we talked about me staying on until I found something else, and they found a replacement, and it didn't go that way. So within about a half hour, I was locked out of systems.
Ooh, okay.
And that was, I believe it was November 19th, 2020, if I remember correctly. My wife was upstairs sleeping. She had just had nose surgery that Monday. This was a Thursday. I was like, well, okay. And she's a nurse. She was only working per diem, so like 2 days a week or a month. I was like, well, this is different. What am I going to do? And so, I woke her up, told her, I was like, hey, like, I don't have a job anymore. I think I'm just going to do my own thing. Like, I don't want to get the rug pulled out from under me again, And she's like, yeah, go for it. I was like, all right, cool. So came back downstairs, got onto the XY website, scheduled a call for the next day, and got everything going. And yeah, it was approved by, I think it was January 21st, 2021, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere around there.
Okay.
And initially was just focusing on millennials at that point for about the first 8 or 9 months.
Okay. And what was the firm name you started with?
It's still the same, Out of the Office.
Okay. Out of the office planning. Okay. So you started out going to work with millennials. And then I guess, what happened? Because obviously you have a very clearly defined niche now. So how did that come to be?
Well, combination of things, I guess, right? Of course, there's I thought I was going with a niche, kind of looking back, I realized it really wasn't, and I went the millennial route because it was something I tried to push at the old firm too. And they kept just pushing it off and saying it wasn't really viable. And so went that route. And you guys always talking about niches and that kind of thing. And so it was there. I just didn't really know what I wanted to do. You know what I mean? And it's like, well, I don't know. I don't really know if I want to go super niche with something. I just don't know if I want to do that. Yeah. So I connected with Justin Green in my onboarding group, XY onboarding group, and he's with Assist FP, XY Member, obviously, and he's working, millennials and also online fitness coaches. And we, quickly became friends and talk all the time and kept talking about him and his niche. And I was like, yeah, you need to lean into that a little bit more than kind of splitting between the two. And I think it's February, I just happened to have a meeting with a tattoo artist. And, I was like, that'd be kind of cool, go work with tattoo artists. And my wife was like, at that point, she's like, no, thanks. You went from being our main earner to 0 clients, new business. We're not, please don't go super, super narrow, no one's done. And kind of weird in a way, right? She's like, that's really limiting, who you're going to work with, and we need money. And she was awesome and went back to work full time and everything. So I could do this. And it's I didn't plan on it. I didn't have a runway saved up. It wasn't I got 2 or 3 years of expenses. I'm ready to go. None of that. It was.
So, I mean, your story mirrors mine with, just one day getting fired, not having the money in the bank and just being like, I don't know, we'll figure it out, which I do want to say, I've been accused of, rightfully so, of glamorizing what that meant. I don't want to gloss over the fact that it's a hard road that I mean, entrepreneurship with a bunch of money in the bank is really hard. Add in that extra level of financial stress. And you said, your wife went back to work full time. That's not a small thing for a partner or spouse to make that commitment. I'm assuming that wasn't just an offhanded decision it's a lot of conversation. It's a lot of emotion. It's a lot of blame and guilt can come up and all of that. And so that it is tough. So can you speak to that? Does that resonate in sort of your experience?
110%. Yeah, man, it was tough because, we have 2 kids. Our daughter is 7 now and our son's 5. And so at that point, and of course it was during COVID and we're up here in Oregon and basically everything's still kind of shut down. We were homeschooling the kids because the virtual school was just a nightmare. But yeah, it was super tough because she had to make this decision, to go back to work, and she was working nights at that point. So she was actually working with medically fragile children in their home. So she had a client that she, would work with, and she's working nights. And I don't know if you've ever worked nights or been with anyone that works nights, but it's brutal. And so for her to agree to go back to that, not back to that, I mean, she's doing 2 or 3 shifts a month, but to go full time to where, we could live was huge. And she did that until she got a new job in October that's days and it's worked out. I mean, it's her dream job essentially, but yeah, man, it was tough. I mean, and she's transitioning from always doing everything with the kids and being the main one kind of helping with everything unless she was sleeping after a shift to not doing that. Right. And so she had a hard time with that as well, not just the work. And it's, a bit different now.
So have you taken on more of those responsibilities?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I've taken the kids to school, picking them up, our son's in preschool, our daughter's in 1st grade at schools now. And, my wife's working day shift at a pediatric clinic. And unless she has a day off during the week or something, I'm dropping them off and picking them up. So my work window and schedule is real kind of wonky and all over the place because like I drop my son off by 9, pick him up at 1. So like a lot of my meetings are very condensed there. And then I have to pick my daughter up at 3. So like every once in a while, I'll squeeze a meeting in between 1 and 3. But yeah, so I'm picking up a lot of that stuff while trying to man the business and also take over like house stuff, that like my wife also did when she stayed at home. So yeah, all that kind of bundled together and the difficulty of entrepreneurship as well. Yeah, man, it's not something to be glorified.
Yeah, you're talking about a lot of different shifts. I mean, we talk a lot on this show about starting the firm and the challenges there, but you and your wife really switched household roles as part of this. With the added like stress of her going to nights, which I've been in that situation with a partner that worked nights and it was a nightmare. So she goes back to work full time, working nights while you're launching a firm. You switch household duties. She's used to doing the drop offs and the pickups. Now you're doing that. That is a lot of change in a very short amount of time. And you're talking, I mean, really immediately that shift happened. So I guess from just a personal perspective, as much as you're willing to share, I mean, how did y'all work through that? I mean, that's a lot.
Yeah, it was a lot of conversations, and just communication is key for sure and it was tough because like I was going through my own struggles with the business, right? And it's never going to be as easy to launch as you think. I know some people have had an easier time launching and making money right away. I'm not in that group, was not in that group. So yeah, it was tough and, all the transitions and then also, like the money situation, of course, we all know as advisors that's a big relationship burden sometimes. And so, yeah, luckily, I mean, she's incredible. We've been together, married 10 years this year, actually. So I think our communication's pretty good, but yeah, just talking through it. And at times, I definitely felt like guilty, like not just going and finding something that would pay and like ease that burden on her. And I had the opportunity, once or twice. Like I even had my old firm owner, actually, they sold their firm, the RIA, and shaved off some of the clients to give to one of his other advisor friends that, they weren't going to transition to this new firm that was buying them out, and referred me to that role. So I could have easily, kind of went that route and accepted and been back in a role that was paying me well and probably quite a bit less stressful.
And I like to joke, no, you don't get as nearly as many job offers until you start a firm. It's amazing how they show up. And I don't know if it's just the universe conspiring against us or just being sure. I mean, it's a great way to be sure you're serious about entrepreneurship is to be constantly given opportunity to not do entrepreneurship. And it's hard to turn that down, especially in that first year. Just for those with kids listening, like that first year is the, oh crap, what did I do phase, and to your point, like some added stressors and you layer in the relationship side, you layer in the money side of not having a lot of savings, like ready to go. Like it is a lot. And that it's hard to turn it down. I mean, it really is. I remember being in that position as well. So
yeah, it was tough for sure. I mean, so with that one, if I'm being honest, there was a little bit of like, I didn't want to go that route also because of where the referral came from, and of course I didn't like the way things broke before. And so I was like, no, I don't want that there. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely been a conversation or two outside of that. And it's like, I don't know, man, that'd be kind of nice. But there's just so much about what I am doing that I enjoy. That's not just the advising that I wouldn't get to do. And so I can't do it.
Yeah.
I can't. But yeah, and for the savings, like luckily, I don't think I'm the only one, but luckily, I was saving well in my retirement accounts. So I did what, some of us probably tell their clients not to do, but, funded things with that.
Just mechanically, how did you fund that? Do you have a 401k?
Yeah.
Like a solo 401k and then do a loan against it?
No. So I just had a 401k at, for my old firm. I had a Roth IRA as well. Yeah. I just took it out. And honestly, I did it as a COVID distribution to where you can spread the tax.
Okay.
Because again, I don't want to get too into it, but part of the argument with the old shop, I would argue, was related in that sense as far as differing views and how to operate, and part of the reason I'm not there. And so I was like, man, I'm just gonna take this money out, see what I can do with it, how long I can make it stretch.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So no, I appreciate you sharing that, because that's these are the decisions we make as entrepreneurs, and being a financial planner is hard sometimes because we have this extra expectation of ourselves that we're great at managing money and that we would never do anything that we would not recommend to our clients. But the truth is, most of financial planning recommendations, how we were taught in school, is about risk mitigation. Entrepreneurship never, ever makes sense on paper. There is no spreadsheet that actually says this is a good idea. It's sort of a calling, or you get forced into it or whatever or whatnot. But there are times where we make those financial decisions. I know Kitsis had I think he did a blog post or something on why he doesn't save into a 401k, and just got, absolutely eviscerated for it. But he's right. And for himself, and that's what makes sense for him and his family. And even though I might as well tell you, I don't have umbrella insurance, and that would be the world is falling because the CFP says you should always have umbrella insurance. I do have umbrella insurance. Don't at me. But anyway,
umbrella insurance.
But those are the types of things that we do that, sometimes I think carry an extra level of guilt, or it's weird to tell people. We're again, I remember Carl Richards back in 2008 talking about losing his house to foreclosure, and again, absolutely eviscerated for it. But it's
he just had a tweet, was it yesterday, about things that were not financially smart or something that he did.
Yeah,
moving out of the country, and his wife going to design school, that kind of stuff. But how it's kind of all been worth it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's funny you say that, because I have a note here on my whiteboard from a podcast I recorded on Monday, actually, with an artist, and we were talking about it because he used to be a painter and transitioned to being a tattoo artist. And he talked about the difference in painting on a square canvas, right? It's blank, it's easy, you know what you're working with, versus skin. And the composition of that is way different, the way it forms around the body, different people's skin. And so I'd already been working on this idea of composition and comparing finance, right? You can look online, you can get answers to different things. Just like I could look online and learn how to draw this tiger on my arm, but I'm not going to know how to compose it on my arm with all these other elements and how they interact, right? Kind of same thing with finance, how everything you do one thing and it affects something else.
Right.
But it's not the same that's on paper, right? If you look on Google or even the CFP textbooks, it's going to tell you, in this situation, you do this, but it doesn't take in that unique, in this situation, like a canvas, right, of what you're doing. And I think that, I just enjoyed talking to him in that analogy, because it's you could give me all your numbers and I can tell you do A, B, and C, but then you actually talk to the person in their situation, right? Like Kitsis, and it's well, no, this doesn't actually make sense for him. And I think we all lose sight of that sometimes.
Agreed. Yeah. It's the art side of financial planning that
exactly, that
sometimes can be a little difficult to embrace. So, but thank you for sharing all that. I appreciate that. Just that's the very real reality of entrepreneurship. So, all right. So let's talk about your niche. So you said you retooled last October and started focusing on tattoo artists. How did you make that decision? Was it really, you said you had one client or one conversation, you're like, this is kind of a cool thing? Or I guess what sort of drove the decision to go hyper niche and away from millennials?
Yeah. So I had that first meeting in February, and Justin Green and I had constant calls and texts and, talking marketing and that kind of stuff. And I'd always use that just as an example, tattoo artist. And so finally kind of built up to this point, and it was always there in the back of my head, that would be really cool, maybe at some point. But I texted him, I was like, hey, can I call you to run an idea by you? This was end of September, just should take 5 minutes. He's like, yeah, no problem. 2 hours later, somehow ended up, at the end of it, I was like, screw it. I'm going to transition to work with tattoo artists. I can't even recall it was some marketing idea. I can't even recall what it really was at this point. All I know is that somehow I ended up at the end of that call with the idea like just for sure, like I'm doing this. And at that point I told my wife, I was like, look, I need to give this a shot. And she was on board. She's like, yeah, I get it. Like she'd seen and heard me talk about other advisors going niche, like Justin and Marlon Wesh, who's the travel nurse advisor, and a few others that I connected with. And she's like, all right, yeah, I get it. And honestly, that first 8 months or so was very, very, very slow. I didn't bring any clients over. So I had 2 or 3, something like that at that point. And so I took a week. I redid my entire website. I scrapped my Instagram. I didn't even want the page I was on. Like I wasn't just going to continue that. I completely just gave it up, started a new one, and, transitioned all my other social media stuff over, and, spent that week really just diving in and learning about all that stuff too, the artists and pay and just the whole everything. Because I wasn't like super tapped into the industry at that point. I had a few tattoos, but I wasn't like, I was hanging out with artists all the time and doing that kind of stuff, which is something I enjoyed. And quite frankly, something I wanted more tattoos, but I never did because I was scared to do so, I guess. Right. Because especially like my old firm, I couldn't roll my sleeves up in the summer because of the tattoo on my forearm. Like they didn't want it showing, and so I obviously didn't want to get more if there's going to be this kind of, people weren't going to like it, or, it was going to affect my job or something. But yeah, so I took that week. I did it. My wife was still, it's like the tail end of her working nights. And so it was a Thursday night. Again, I remember it was like midnight. I was done updating it. And I was like, I just have to push the button, transfer the domain to this version. Like, and I tell you what, man, that right there was way scarier than calling you guys and like agreeing to start the firm and like in the beginning. It's like, oh, that's easy, like done. But hitting that button, my wife's at work, I text her, I'm like, oh, I'm going to do it. She's like, I text Justin, he's East Coast, so he was already asleep, but it's like, dude, I'm doing it. When you wake up, it's going to be changed. And so, yeah, I hit the button, woke up Friday and got on Instagram, started following artists and all that stuff. And which is where like all of them reside, right? So I'm really not doing much on LinkedIn, not even really Facebook. Like Twitter is just FinTwit for the most part. So I was getting active on Instagram and following people and all that stuff, and still unsure if it was even going to work, right? If they're going to be like, who's this guy, come in here and try and tell us what to do. But it was cool because, so that was Friday. Saturday, I connected with I followed one artist, local artist, Friday. She followed me back on Saturday, and I woke up Sunday morning and she'd scheduled an introductory call with me on Monday. I was not getting any traction like that, honestly, with what I was doing before. And I was like, oh, okay, this might actually work. She didn't ultimately sign up as a client, which kind of, very first one, I'm not surprised, but I knew right then that it was going to work because I'm talking to her, I'm like, well, why, she's like, I went through your site and everything talked to me. Like I went through, I was like, yes, that's me. Yeah. Cause I have does this sound like you, or, questions on my website. And she's like, man, it was like, you're talking right to me. I was like, sweet. Like, okay, like I'm onto something here. And so, kept chugging along. And then that next Friday, so exactly a week from transitioning, I'm just outside with the kids after school or hanging out with the neighbor kids. I'm talking to one of my neighbors up the street. Pull out my phone real quick and noticed that Carl Richards had somehow found my website and, mentioned it. And that was also kind of cool. I was like, okay, like it's getting more traction somehow.
Because it's really unique. I mean, that's.
Yeah. And I was nervous there. Like, are people going to think, I'm weird working with tattoo artists, like in the industry as well. Right. Like, I didn't know how that was going to kind of go. Obviously it's gone opposite, which is great. But yeah, I mean, that was cool because it's like, okay, like I'm getting kind of that recognition too, even though I, at that point, didn't even have tattoo artist clients. But yeah, it picked up a lot quicker, I'd say, than expected, with people actually like being on board with it and liking the content and actually, interacting and messaging me for questions and being open to me helping. Because sometimes, and some artists are this way, but I don't want to say they're reserved, but they're going to question you quite a bit before they open up and are willing to let you in, if you will.
So when you're working with tattoo artists, like, what do you know that I don't know? Like, what is it? Is it primarily just how you're talking to them? The fact that, if folks can't see the video on our website, but like you have tattoo sleeves, I do not. Is it really just that you come from that community and you can speak to it? Are there issues specific to tattoo artists that you are becoming or have become the expert in that you're able to speak to more so than other advisors?
Yeah, I mean, of course, right. I think with every niche, there's very large overarching things that are all going to be the same, right? They're all self-employed for the most part. There's like one or two shops where they're W-2 and it's super unique, but they're all self-employed. And so like those big things are very similar, right? But I think they appreciate me diving in, understanding more of their thought process, where they're coming from, how they get paid, how they run their schedules and their deposits, just talking to them without a bunch of jargon, right? Like I've had multiple responses where it's like, oh, thank you. Like, I finally understand this now, and not coming in a suit or anything like that. Like, just, hey, I'm here to help. There's some unique stuff that I've learned since starting. Like disability insurance is a little tougher to get. I haven't got any for any clients yet, but from the few interactions I've had talking to people about that, because apparently they're still viewed as more outlaw-ish, even though it's not how they are for especially a lot of newer artists.
Yep.
Yeah, and then just like, I'd say I've been good at comparing financial topics to things that they do on a day-to-day and they understand. Like the composition of a financial plan versus a tattoo and the different aspects, kind of like I mentioned earlier. I did a post on investment theory, but related it to color theory, after I read a color theory book and kind of realized some crossover there. Yeah. So, I mean, I hate to say like I'm super, super unique in that sense, right? Because the big things are similar to other self-employed people, but I think just understanding their lifestyle and what they do and how they do it and their schedules and just understanding that and talking to them about it rather than coming in a different way.
Yeah. I mean, it's fair to say that, there are different, again, I liked the definition of niche is sort of what's the problem you're trying to solve. And the problem can be that certain individuals feel excluded from financial services because they can't find people who look like them, who understand them. I remember talking to this young kid that I say kid now, coming out of college. I'm getting old when kids in college are kids to me. But he was, just like a total rocker, had this huge mohawk. And he was like, yeah, like got my first job, like cutting off the mohawk, like gonna get buttoned up. And I was like, God, like that sucks, because here's a kid who probably could connect with a lot of folks that I cannot, that your traditional suited advisor cannot. Because, there is something to be said for just wanting to feel comfortable with the advisor when you're talking about this incredibly emotional, sensitive topic of money. And so, it doesn't necessarily have to be that tattoo artists have this like crazy specific nuance that only you're the expert in. If you were diving in like stock options or something like that, this like really technical, it doesn't have to be a technical knowledge topic. It really can be understanding lifestyle and being able to sort of meet them where they're at. That defines that niche.
Yeah. And really just, teaching them some of the stuff that, they don't really think of, right? Because they're great at what they do at creating art and they spend a ton of time doing that, but none of them, I mean, maybe a couple enjoy like the business side of it. Right? And they're all self-employed. And so like they have to do it, and also explaining, some people call it like a pirate lifestyle where, it's very much like the seat of your pants, kind of like I get cash in, cash goes out, like nothing's really tracked. We know where that goes as far as tracking with taxes and that kind of thing. And so, but they want to get to that, building wealth and doing that kind of stuff. But there's still a lot of shops where newer artists are told to, kind of operate under the table in a lot of ways. I even have clients that went to a tattoo school here in Portland that business part of it, if you will, if you don't see the video, I'm air quoting, was, they mentioned mattress money. And so, it's like they're at that point, and in Oregon, we're the only weird state that requires people go to a tattoo school in order to get licensed, whereas everywhere else it's typically an apprenticeship.
Okay.
So they have to go to one of these places, and then they're being taught this way that's going to set them up to fail and not really succeed when it comes to that financially, because they want to buy a home, or they want to save for retirement or Social Security down the road, right? But they're not tracking stuff, and it's like, I don't know how much I can tell you to put in your solo 401k if we don't
have any earned income.
Yeah, we're not putting it there, or it's way lower than it actually is. So my conversations are a lot different than before with retirees, right?
Absolutely. Retirees are not dealing with cash and not declaring income.
Yeah, and so I think like just doing that too, and not coming at it in a judgmental way. You know what I mean? Just being like, okay, well, we can work with that. Let's backtrack and see where we are and put some numbers together, and set you up to go forward. Awesome. Yeah, it's different.
So you mentioned this earlier, but can you talk about your podcast that you have? Mm-hmm. Has that been a big driver of marketing from a marketing perspective for you in terms of getting new clients in the door? So tell me about the podcast.
Yeah. So Tattoo Wealth. It's on, Apple and Spotify and whatnot. But basically I'm just, for the most part, interviewing tattoo artists, talking about their journey, things they've learned along the way. I've had a few episodes where I interview other experts to talk. Like I've interviewed Brock Buckles with BC Brokerage to talk life insurance. And we touched on disability there. Talked to a buddy of mine, Vinny, who's a mortgage lender up here, about the home buying process, because that's a big one, of course.
Yep, especially when you're self-employed.
Yeah. Maggie, hope I don't butcher her last name, Clockingay, to talk about like money scripts and that kind of stuff. And eventually I'm going to be mixing some solo episodes to go a little bit deeper on, certain financial topics. Honestly, didn't think anyone really wanted that until I took a poll on Instagram, and I got most people said, yes, please do that. And I didn't think they really want me to talk for, 15, 20 minutes on retirement accounts or some tax related thing, but they did. So queuing those up. But yeah, it's been cool. I mean, I was a little nervous at first doing it, because it is like you're in that seat kind of controlling the conversation and the pressure to like make it work. And if anyone would actually want to do it, right? Especially coming into the field unknown, if you will. But it's been good. It's got a lot of traction. I'm now getting a few people like reaching out like, hey, so like, how do you pick your guests? I just, people I connect with, or I'll ask them, and they're like, wow, are you interested? And like, yeah, and so it's kind of cool now getting to that point. I'm only the 16th episode comes out today. So I've been trying to do it weekly. I've missed a week or two, but yeah, it's been good. And sharing it on Instagram has helped, because then, they'll repost it. I'll make little clips, like little reels on there. So to get more followers and interact with more people on Instagram. It's really been good that way, which is kind of cool. And I just enjoy it. Like, I think every single person I've interviewed has such a unique, fascinating story that I think goes against what a lot of people think a typical tattoo artist did to get into that field, right?
It's a lot of
like, that's like that kid growing up in high school that like got a tattoo at 16 and like you knew he was gonna, go that route. It's like, no, like the guy, the episode that's coming out today, Anthony, he was a painter, like doing really good portraits and things, like went to Italy for a couple years to study the classic painters, right? And just happened to stumble into tattoos, and actually didn't have any tattoos until he got an apprenticeship at a shop in North Carolina, and gave himself his first tattoo. Like he just didn't see that as like, he didn't have that direction or that idea. And my first guest, Jason, he found out about tattooing really when he was on a trip to Hawaii with his parents when he was 12, and they got a tattoo, and he was able to go into the shop, got fascinated. His parents agreed, liked it, and pushed him, yeah, if you want to do that, that's cool. And so it's just all these different fascinating stories of talking to people that I would do just for fun, even if it wasn't for the like marketing piece of it. Yeah, it's a good time.
That's cool.
That's it. Made some friends doing it too, with people I've connected with. So
no, that's awesome. I mean, much of why we do XYPN Radio is just to be able to share people's stories into why they started a firm, what was that journey like? But that career story, we want advisors who are out there to be able to see they're not alone. They're not the only one who had this non-traditional path. Some people had a traditional path, but not most didn't. And the same with your tattoo artist, of just being able to see how folks got into that profession. And I'm assuming there's going to be an infinite amount of content around being able to answer those financial questions that that the education you can provide that you're giving your clients right now around taxes. And, there's probably a series of episodes on why you should declare your income, and how that works. So, well, listen, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show. I'm going to ask you the final question, which is, if there's one thing that you wish you could go back and tell your younger self, what do you think that one thing would be?
Man, this is tough. I've actually kind of been thinking of it.
Those who think about it the most are the ones who can't ever come up with an answer. So.
Yeah, man. No, so again, Justin Green tagged me in some 22 and some post on Twitter about advice to your younger self 10 years ago. Last week, and I've yet to make my response video because I've been stumped on this here. Man, I almost just say be yourself. I think, and that maybe sounds a little cliche or corny, but especially in financial services, if you go the quote unquote traditional route right into the bigger firms and that kind of thing, there's very much a culture of everyone's, in a suit and looking a certain way and doing, you can express yourself sure a little bit and, your tie color or socks or, whatever. But I don't know, I still feel like not put on a little bit, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I think just being yourself, is what I'd say, because I think I kind of got into the field and buttoned up, if you will, and put a part of me in a box for when I wasn't working, right? If that makes sense. And since reopened the said box and thrown the box away, just kind of kept it here, which is nice. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot more places now, luckily, that you can do that in this industry and not feel like you have to put on.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that. And again, thank you for taking the time to come on the show and share your journey to launching a firm. And I mean, you're in the middle of the you're in the middle of the tough part, coming out of it a little bit on the backside, but
year one, number two.
Exactly. But in such a cool niche and focus. So I appreciate you taking the time to come on the show and share your story with listeners.
Yeah. Thanks, Alan. Appreciate it.
Thanks for being a listener of XYPN Radio. We want to hear from you about what you want to hear from us. What types of guests do you want to learn from next? What topics or pain points are you craving insights on? Go to xyplanningnetwork.com/radio survey to fill out a short survey telling us what and who you want to hear from on XYPN Radio. That's xyplanningnetwork.com/radio survey. Also, be sure to go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to join our private Facebook group for fee-for-service advisors. It's the community you've been looking for that's there to provide support no matter where you are in your journey. Best of all, it's free. Again, that's xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP.
Thanks for listening to XYPN Radio. If you enjoyed the show, please be sure to leave a review that will help grow the movement of fee-for-service advisors, serving next-gen clients and building the firms of their dreams. That's all for today's episode. Until next time.